The Washington Commanders desperately need an impact edge rusher. Will Adam Peters take one at 29? Well, we've got your top 5 right here on Ref the District. Let's go. Greetings and salutations and welcome to Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner over there, and we have your top 5 edge rushers to take at 29. Now, maybe they all won't be there, and maybe Washington doesn't actually take an edge rusher at 29, but odds are they will, in fact, take one sometime in the draft. That would be my personal bet. Now, if you agree with me, you can head over to Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform, and your number one source for all betting things. Madness, March Madness is going on right now. Buzzer beaters for Maryland and excitement there on the court. So whether or not you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is the ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest. Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. Of course, we encourage you to bet responsibly, and I would not personally put money on a pick at 29 because I think Adam Peters is going to fall back a little bit. But if he stays, very interested in taking an edge rusher in that spot. A few good ones. One Stoner we don't think. We're not even gonna do a big talk about him. He's not making our top 5, but I feel like if people are coming to this video, they need to know there's one guy we're not going to list here because he's going to be gone well before 29. Who is that in your mind?
Abdul Carter is a beast, man. He is somebody you have to account for on every play, even at the pro level. When he gets there, whoever gets Abdul Carter is getting a premier pass rusher, run stopper, all of. I mean, he's Micah Parsons part 2. Wore the same number, played the same position at the same school. I love Abdul Carter and everything. He's going top 5. Good for him because he's well worth it. I would love to have him in Washington. They're not moving up to the top 5 to get Abdul Carter.
Fair enough. As long as he doesn't end up in the East like Micah Parsons, we should be all right. Now, maybe we don't get a Micah Parsons at 29 Stoner, but maybe one of these guys does get there, and we're going to talk about who, if out of these 5 were available, who we like at the edge position. So let's get started here with number 5 on our list. It's Mike Green from Marshall. A little bit undersized according to Adam Peters. And I guess maybe we should bring up Adam Peters' discussion here to start. But first with Mike Green, 6'3", 251 pounds, has 22.5 career stacks. Now, I brought up that Adam Peters kind of checklist, Stoner. I know you have it in front of you. I'm going to talk about the Sam 48 tweet from late February, where Adam Peters actually talked specifics about what he looks for in an edge rusher. I mean, I loved that he went this deep into what he looks for, by the way. Ideally, they're 6'5", have 36-inch arms, a 1.3 second 10-yard split in the 40-yard dash, and a slew of intangibles.
Yeah.
Adam Peters says to be really good in this league, I think you have to have both speed and power.
Yeah.
And I think if you look back at free agency, Dante Fowler, not kept on the roster, maybe more of a speed guy than a power guy, a guy who gets bulldozed on the run, but has the speed to get double-digit sacks. That's not a guy on the roster anymore. Here in Washington. Maybe one of these guys can fill in, but they need to hit maybe not some of those ideal stats, but speed and power is what he's looking for. And let's see how Mike Green lines up to that for you.
Yeah, and I don't think any of these guys really kind of fit that exact mold that he's looking for. It's hard to fit that exact. That's
Miles Garrett, by the way. That's true. Off Miles Garrett.
Absolutely. He's talking about the Bosa brothers. He's talking about the Watt brothers. He's talking about Myles Garrett. For sure that all those guys have that. I don't think anybody in this draft has that. I don't think anybody has those long arms or have those split times in the 40 at the 10 yards. He likes the 1.3, as you said. A lot of these guys don't have that. But if Mike Green is there at 29, there's a possibility to take him. He doesn't, like you said, he's a little bit smaller in terms of his weight. Sure, you can get your weight up as you mature and get a little bit older. He's got 32-inch arms, Nathan. 32. That's 4 inches shorter than what Adam Peters specifically likes. His production is there, as you said, with his 22 and a half career sacks. 17 came just this last year, which he led the entire country in sacks.
Yeah.
17
big explosive
in an NFL, in a NCAA season, regardless of what level. That's a lot. That's more than one a game on average. So his productivity was there. His measurables are maybe not quite there, but you just look at his results and it's pretty enticing if you're thinking about getting somebody at 29. I don't know that he's going to be there, Nathan, at 29. A lot of people like what he brings, but I don't think this is the guy for Washington, and I don't think it's the guy for Adam Peters specifically.
Interesting that you think that. I mean, when I'm looking over the information that is available on him, it seems like he would be a pretty good fit for what Washington wants. A good pass rusher, good in the run. Now, maybe fits more of, especially with his size, looking more of like an outside linebacker, but that could be something Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. want, because then you can kind of move him around a little bit instead of having him as a right side edge, kind of have him in that ability to, as a linebacker role where he fills in the gaps a little bit more on that part. So I like that he's strong against both. I'd say the biggest concern for me is that a 1-year wonder year? Smart for him to come out. Not that he had a bad first year, by the way. He grades out really well his first year as well. Doesn't have the explosive stats.
Right.
But those explosive stats are why he's going to get picked in the first or second round, is because 17 and a half sacks, like you said, that's absurd in college football to have that kind of level of production. And I just worry that this is another kind of Jamin Davis, a Trey Lance, where they have one good season in college football and get picked maybe higher than they deserve to be, or need to be, rather.
Yeah, and as you said, the explosiveness is there. You see that on tape everywhere. You see his repertoire of pass rush moves. He's not just a one move guy. He has all kinds of ways to get to the quarterback. The thing that stood out to me watching him is he seemed a little bit undisciplined. He looked like he wanted to. It was like the water boy, right? The coach told the water boy, said, "Go get the quarterback," and that was kind of his mindset. Was, I'm just going to go get the quarterback. I don't care what you call on defense. I don't care what's going on otherwise. I'm going straight for the quarterback, however I get there, and I'm not worried about anything else. That can also be looked at as a good quality too, right? That's what you want from an end. But in this system and what Washington needs, they need a guy who can set the edge, who can play off the edge, and as you said, be powerful, that Adam Peters is looking for. So a little bit too undisciplined for me, but if you can go out there and you could get double-digit sacks and the higher end into the teens and into the 15 and so on, then you're doing something right. So somebody's going to take a chance on him, probably in the first round. I don't know, like I said, that he's going to be there. But if you look at Washington's current defensive end situation, your starters are Dorrance Armstrong and, I don't know, pick a guy, right? Is it going to be Jacob Martin, Cleveland Farrell,
Baptiste,
Andre Jones Jr., right? There isn't really a guy who sort of stands out on the other side. And that's why I think they need to get somebody in this draft. For me, this is a need pick. And it might be Mike Green if he's available at 29.
Yeah, we'll see on the big board where these guys land later. Of course, you can catch us on Wednesday, where we'll talk about this and maybe even have a little mock draft exercise for us to do. Let's move on to number 4 on the list here. James Pearce Jr., 6'5", 245 pounds, 19 and a half career sacks out of Tennessee. So Marshall, not a Power 5 school, Still impressive to get 17 sacks in a year. This is 19 and a half career sacks in a Power 5 school for Pearce Jr. What, and he meets the 6'5" criteria there for Adam Peters. What else does he hit on, and why is he number 4 on your list?
This is a producer. This is a guy who shows up on tape all the time. He is excellent against the run. He needs to add a little bit of weight, like some of these other guys that we're talking about. But again, they'll do it on a 6'5" frame. He has the perfect size that way. He runs a 4.47 40, so he's got quickness. Now his 10-yard split was 1.58. Peters again is looking for a guy in the 1.3 range, so maybe not quite as explosive off the ball as he wants. But this is a producer. This is a guy who shows up for pressures, for sacks, for tackles, for losses. He can come out of the 2-point stance, as you see in his photo there. He can come out of the 3-point stance. He can do it all. You play at Tennessee for 3 years and you put up all kinds of numbers every single year. You're doing something when you play in that SEC. I like James Pearce a lot. He's another guy that I don't know is going to be there at 29, but he is a guy.
To say any of these guys will be, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, it's a deep edge rusher or defensive end draft. It's not top heavy. You've got your Abdul Carter at the very top, right? Who's going to go top 5. And then everybody else kind of falls in that 15 to 50 range, where you're going to have probably 7 or 8 guys drafted within 15 to 50. That's a lot. That means it's deep, but there's nobody that really jumps off the page unless you're talking about Abdul Carter. But James Pearce Jr., that's a dude. I wouldn't hate that they take him at pick 29.
Yeah, 9.38 relative athletic score, a RAS, as we will refer to here. Positives in the broad, positives in the 40-yard dash, the 10-yard split ranking there. And so to explain RAS real quick, it's on a scale of 10. So, of course, the closer to 10 you are, the better it is. And so he does rank very well out of there. Just okay body size, good explosion grade, which is actually something it's a little odd to see his explosion grade not very high, because on tape, if you're watching highlights, he can get off the ball, and you can see that in the 10-yard split, but you can't necessarily see it in his vertical or broad jump. So kind of interesting there, but he does rank, it says here from Kent Lee Platt, who does the RAS analytics here, ranks 114 out of the 1,829 defensive ends from 1987 to 2025. So
it's pretty good.
Really good there. Pretty good.
Pretty good. 110, Nathan, 110 pressures in 3 years. 110 pressures in 3 years is a lot. So his numbers do jump off as you got on there. 19 and a half career sacks. He had 10 2 seasons ago, 7.5 last year. This is a guy. Look, they drafted him at 29. I wouldn't be mad.
No, you probably won't be mad then, especially here with the Ohio State product. Who you said, you told me this was your guy. Strange you list him at number 3.
Yeah.
And not higher, because this is your personal take on who Washington would take here. And I'm going to let you butcher JT's name here before we get there. No, we're just going to call him JT then, from Ohio State, because neither one of us wants to disrespect this young man's last name. And so even doing the research on how to pronounce it, I was just like, my mouth is not going to get this out the first time. So I'm going to work on this, especially if Washington takes this young man at 29. 6'4", 265 pounds, 23 and a half career sacks for JT out of Ohio State, winning a national championship this last year. In fact, probably one of the reasons why he won't be there at 29 is he had an insane run on Ohio State's move towards the title there. The first ever playoffs in the NCAA, and JT showed up and was outstanding. Is that why he is your guy at the top?
Well, I mean, if you show up in big games and national championship games against some of the best teams, 2 sacks in that championship game, that's a big deal, right? You get 2 sacks anytime, it's a big deal. You get 2 sacks in a championship game, you're showing me something. Man, this guy is an athlete. He's a football guy. He averaged 18 points per game as a senior in high school playing basketball. That's how athletic this guy is. And most of these guys can be athletic, but look at 6'4", 265, scoring 18 points per game in high school is pretty impressive. But what I really love about him is he does everything right. He understands his position and what he's supposed to be doing. He understands misdirection and how to read it and how to counter it. He's not a guy who just goes straight for the quarterback. He's excellent against the run. He is a set the edge kind of guy. He will go get the quarterback, as you got there. He had 12 and a half sacks last year, 23 and a half in his 3-year career there at Ohio State. This is a dude. This is a guy who loves football, understands football, studies football, makes the right plays. Super athletic. He's not going to have a huge RAS score necessarily because he does those intangibles that Adam Peters loves, which I love as well. He is a guy that I think would fit seamlessly into Washington's defense on the right side of the defense. So I'd love to have him in there. I think he might be available at 29, but the reason I had him at 3 and not 1 is because I tried to rank it in terms of what I thought Washington's board would look like based on the whole Adam Peters criteria for what he looks for in a defensive end. But again, this is a guy I think would fit great in Washington's defense, and I hope he's available, and I hope they take him.
It's interesting you bring up the big board for Adam Peters because I think that this is still kind of an undecided front office in the sense that we don't know where they're going. Not that they don't know where they're going. They probably have a strong idea of where they're going, right? Yeah.
We got no idea.
But we have no idea because, in previous years, it was pretty easy to tell what kind of players were high on the list and why it was always a shock to us that the players we liked weren't the players the front office liked. But this time around, I feel like we're going to have a little bit more consensus eventually. Maybe 3 years in, we'll be able to sit there and say, okay, they're going to go for the athletic traits over some of these other traits. They're going to go for the tape, the guys who show out in tape more than they're going to go for somebody who has a high RAS, or they're going to find those intangibles. Last year, most of the draft picks were captains for their teams. Is that something that's going to be a focus? It was something the team did mention. Dan Quinn and Adam Peters said that they purposely were taking captains because they needed leaders of men. But is that going to be something going forward that is going to be high? Or as they also saw, the RAS was very high on last year's draft. So I just don't know where we're going to go here on the big board.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have that sort of idea yet because we only have one draft to kind of base our opinions on. We've only seen one. So whatever they end up doing this year, we'll start to see the pattern develop, and we'll see if it is those guys only with high RAS or guys only who are captains that are going to get drafted a little higher. It's going to be interesting because we don't know if they're picking at 29 or if they're going to move back or move up to get Abdul Carter or whatever.
It's fun to be in a spot where you just don't know what's going to happen, and also in a spot where you can still just trust Adam Peters and what he wants to do with the team because he's so far proven to be competent in his ability to draft players. Maybe it's not JT here out of Ohio State. Maybe it is Mykel Williams out of Georgia. 6'5", 268 pounds, 14 career sacks here for the man out of Georgia. Somebody who might not be available at 29 because he is starting to move up some boards there. Some people talk around him as maybe even the top 10 at this point. That might be a little high. It's going to depend on team needs and stuff. And there's always a shock in the NFL draft. So who knows here? But what do you think about Williams as far as an option for the Commanders at 29?
Yeah, he's a dude. He's a stud. He's got the right size. He's got the right stuff on tape, but he is also a guy that sometimes disappears a little bit. Whereas some of these other guys, you constantly see them dominating in every game. He's a guy that tends to disappear. But look, at 6'5", 260, runs a 4.77 40, is 34 3/8 length arms. His 10-yard split is 1.59, a little bit slower than what Adam Peters likes, but not crazy slow. But he can certainly sit there and he will flash on tape. You're like, oh my gosh, this dude is absolutely dominating. And then the next week you watch him and you're like, what happened? Why is he not dominating a lesser opponent? And so it just kind of makes you wonder. That can happen for 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds. What you want to see is you want to see that domination and how, once he gets into your organization, how you can, make that even better, trying to work that and make their moves and their abilities that much better. So he's a guy that could definitely work with. Again, at 29, we'll see. A lot of these guys, some of these guys, maybe all of these guys are not going to be available at 29. But at some point, they do have to get an edge. And if they end up with Mykel Williams, that would be a great pick.
Yeah, right now his average draft position is looking like he's not going to be available.
No,
but
he's not.
you don't know as far as when it actually goes, because right now average draft position is just a bunch of yahoos filling out some mock drafts.
Yeah.
So that is important to note as far as where that goes. It would be nice if Washington could land one of these premier players, Mykel Williams as well. I do wonder if like you said, the kind of not necessarily taking time off of plays, but getting wiped out, right? Not being an impact player, if that is going to push him lower. I know that there's some exciting stats, and like I just said, where he's getting picked in like around the 15 pick range. But that again is people during the off season kind of working themselves up. Look at where he was originally when it came to his draft position. If you go back at the start of last year, this was a guy who was being picked in the 3rd round. Did he do enough this year to really warrant getting picked in the 1st or 2nd rounds? And so kind of seeing that and kind of wondering and looking at your original big board. Don't focus on after you've trying to really dig into the analytics where people move up and stuff, because we've seen a lot of smoke screens when it comes to that as well.
And sometimes what'll happen during the course of the draft, and the draft is very fast paced. For us, it seems slow at home. For those guys in those war rooms, when you got 5 minutes, that is fast paced for them to be able to make a decision. And if a guy goes at 13, let's say, if a Mykel Williams goes at 13 by some rogue GM who says, we love this guy, then all of a sudden that might scare the guy at 16 who says, well, we need an edge. And then all of a sudden the edges go on a run and you see 3 or 4 picked right before you even get to 29.
Yeah,
and all the guys
teams jumping up.
Yeah, and all those guys that you had ranked, all of a sudden they're all gone. And then you get to 29, and you're like, well, maybe Mike Green is not worth the 29th pick, or whomever. I'm just throwing a name out there. He's not worth the 29th pick, so we're going to go in a different direction, even though the whole time they had planned to pick a guy at 29.
Williams, number 2 on our list for at 29, and only beat out by one guy right now.
Yeah.
Staying in the Southeastern Conference, this time going over to the Aggies. TAMU. It is Shemar Stewart, 6'5", 265 pounds. Surprisingly, only 4.5 career sacks.
Yeah. But you know
how
who
does
else
he end up, a guy 4.5 career sacks, end up as number 1 on the list to be taken at 29? That one, I feel bad when I decided that was going to be the underbar, was the height, weight, and then career sacks. I picked career sacks because we want an edge rusher who's going after the quarterback. And then I get to Shemar Stewart's graphic, and I was just like, oh man, I'm doing this guy dirty. But you love him and think that he's the number 1 target at 29.
Yeah, I think if he's there, you have to run to the phones to make that selection for Shemar Stewart. 4.5 career sacks. That's fair to say that that's not great. Daniil Hunter, when he was in college, had 4.5 career sacks, and look what he's done since he's gotten to the NFL. That's the kind of the comparison they're looking at. He's got the size. He's got the speed. He's 21 years old. He played 3 years at Texas A&M. Raz score, Nathan. 9.9 4.99. Third best ever since they've been doing Raz. Would you say 87 or 97?
Yeah, I
Since
think it was
1997.
87.
Right? They've been doing it since then. The third best at defensive end in the history that they've been doing. He is a freak athletically. And when you got a 21-year-old kid who's a freak athletically and has the size to go with it, and he's there at 29, you run to get your pick. It's funny that we still use that term. You run to the podium with your pick, because that's what they used to do, right? They used to act
physically had to go there.
You had to write the guy's name down and take it up to the commissioner to make the pick. Now, obviously, it's a little more digital these days, but
sophisticated.
Yeah, a little more sophisticated. But a 1.58 10-yard split is not exactly in the range. But I mean, come on, 9.99 is a ridiculous RAS score. 21 years old. This guy has all the potential in the world. If he's there, you got to take him. And we didn't even mention 4 or 5 other guys who could be there at 29 that Washington would be happy with. But these are just 5 guys we looked at. Shemar Stewart is the top of my list of guys not named Abdul Carter, who for sure won't be there. He's not getting out of the top 5.
Sticking with Shemar for a moment here, that what you're talking about is what we see a lot in the NFL when it comes to the draft is you do take that potential over maybe somebody who had a more productive college career. Shemar Stewart is still working on his technique. He's still working on his explosiveness. He's already explosive, but he hasn't hit his prime. 21 years old. He's not even close to his prime. So he's going to get even more athletic. He's going to get more explosive. He's going to get more mentally sound. And if you work on that technique, you can really unlock a special player. So we see NFL teams do this all the time where they want that. And I've likened it before, right? When it's, if you're going to the Olympics and you got 2 people who run the 100 meters at the same time, but one's got perfect technique and the other one doesn't, and you can only take one of them, Stoner. You take the guy who doesn't have perfect technique because they ran the same way. Now, if you make him run perfect technique, you can maybe inch out a fraction of a second. And that's why NFL GMs take the bigger player.
I am interested in your take on this, Nathan, in that, you are a draft the best player available guy. You stand by that. You're also the guy who says that your edge rusher or your get after the quarterback guy is the second most important position on a football team.
Correct.
You combine those two. How does that? Those are almost like polar opposites when you get to what Washington should do at 29.
So this one, I feel like it's aligned, right? Because if you're looking at the best player available, you obviously have a strong need for an edge rusher. And you hope one of these guys are, and maybe, like you said, it's not one of these guys. And if you have somebody you would like to list, let us know in the comment section. We'd love to do this because, like I said, we're going to be talking more about this on our flagship on Wednesday night, which you'll have to join us at 7:30 Eastern for. But as far as like marrying the best player available and the need here, it's just going to line up because even within the buckets, right? You might have 2 bucket B guys, and we really got to probably hone my little mentality here down so that way it's more, visual for people. But if you have bucket B guys, right, you're going to rank them on their particular ability here. Well, one of the things is position value does absolutely play a part in where somebody lands within the bucket and also what buckets they land in, because you have an edge rusher. Edge rushers have a high possibility. If they're a popping out kind of guy, they're a bucket A, right? But those are bucket A is like your top 10 picks, right? You're probably not getting a bucket A guy at pick 29. Just probably not happening.
Right.
But you're rarely going to see a tight end who's a bucket A guy. You're rarely going to see a guard who's a bucket A guy type deal. But if they're in the bucket B, they might have a similar score in your rankings to an edge rusher, but an edge rusher is probably, unless if they're both bucket B guys, your edge rusher might be a little bit higher, gets a few extra points in that bucket because of the fact that positional need is higher. So, but there's a lot that goes into it. And I just feel like this is going to be a good draft for Washington to line up some of their needs with best player available mentality, because I do feel, while we don't know what Adam Peters does and how he manages his drafts, I do feel that he is a best player available kind of guy. And you can see that in Johnny Newton. Johnny Newton,
Sure.
defensive tackle. You don't need a defensive tackle. You've got 2 on payroll. You got a bunch of other guys who are just fine as backups. And here you get a guy with your first pick outside of Jaden Daniels, and you get another defensive tackle. And why? Because that was a bucket A guy.
Sure.
That could be found in the bucket B type picks, and you just take them, and then you figure out the rest. Okay. And I think that GMs like Adam Peters, like Howie Roseman, they understand that, because what your roster needs more than anything is talent.
Sure.
You pay the coaches to figure out how to use talent. And Washington, Joe Witt Jr. and Dan Quinn had a bunch of Jags, just another guy for those who might not be familiar, on the roster last year. And they still managed to get somebody with 10 plus sacks. They still managed to have good pressure rates. Now, they didn't have great coverage, which they seemingly have fixed with some of their roster, picks and stuff. So if they can figure out the edge rusher, watch out. This defense could be an entire different defense next year.
I bet they wish they would have drafted a defensive end / edge last year in the second round rather than Johnny Newton. I mean, obviously there wasn't a guy who fit your bucket or whatever, right? There wasn't a guy who was available that fit into what they're trying to pick. But I bet you they wish they would have drafted a defensive end.
I can tell you, over Johnny Newton, you better believe that they were happy they picked Johnny Newton. Johnny Newton, for the record, not this year's draft, so I'm going to keep this short. So I always say the second most important is a guy who gets after the quarterback. And I specify it that way because it doesn't necessarily have to mean an edge rusher. Johnny Newton can get after the quarterback, and you're going to be quite excited to see him in his sophomore season here in Washington. Hopefully he does have some open middle ground there, because there'll be an exciting edge rusher on the outside. Maybe one of these 5 picked at 29. Of course, we're excited for you to tell us who you think and who you like, and where would you rank these guys for your pick at 29. Of course, make sure you also hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, share it with other people to get their thoughts as well. Who will Washington take at 29? Will it even be an edge rusher? We'll have that conversation again on Wednesday for our flagship program, 7:30 Eastern. Catch us live. Join that conversation. I'm Nathan. That's the Stoner here, brought to you by Bet Online from the Believe Network. And until next time,
I hope you're happy with Jacob Martin as your starting defensive end.
be a fan.